This is the Final Round Podcast, coming to you live from the FingerLakes1.com studios in downtown Seneca Falls, New York. And now your host, Chris Markport. Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this edition of the Final Round Drag Racing Podcast. Excited to have all of you along for the ride with us here this evening. Episode number 70 is on deck. Should be a good one, to say the least. We've got Pete Maduri joining us here in just a few minutes. Jason Oldfield is hanging out in the background. He's just got his headset and microphone all hooked up. He's working from home this evening, battling through some struggles, to say the least. Jason, you've got some issues with the car. You've got some issues with your back. It's been a rough week. Where'd you go, Jason? Well, we may have lost Jason. We'll have to see how that goes. But Pete Maduri is also with us here in the background. Pete's joining us here to talk a lot about the racing season as it went for him. Pete, man, appreciate you making some time for us here and hanging out in the cold. How cold is it out there?
I feel like racing weather.
Well, tell me a little bit about the season. I mean, it was an outstanding effort front to back for you, coming away with the TNT Series championship. Certainly no easy task, to say the least. Tell us a little bit about the year.
Yeah, definitely, in my opinion, one of the tougher series in the Northeast. Honestly, our season, my season was actually somewhat rough, except for this championship. We did a lot of races at divisionals and whatnot, and, we did okay, but no real highlights except for this championship and the TNT Series. But yeah, right from the start, my father and myself partnered up this year, and we were able to qualify well, and had a great season. Really a tough series. The qualifying in itself is really quite a task. There, you get a lot of points just for qualifying, and it's always a really tight field.
Well, that's one of the things we talked about last week is how important qualifying well really is on the TNT Series, and if you can do that, you can pile up some points fast. Then you go a couple rounds, and you're at a juncture where you're scoring pretty serious points every time you go out. How difficult is it to set fast time when everything is as tight as it is? You've got guys that are running .90000. It's just as far back as it'll go, and to pick up a couple fast time awards is certainly an accomplishment in and of itself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've been running the series, my father and myself, for quite a while now. And, my strategy in the earlier years was always to kind of lay up on the first qualifier. We usually get two qualifiers. So, the first one I would always try to aim at that 1092, maybe 1091, and then step it up on the second qualifier, trying to get, right on the 1090. But
sure.
This year, 1092 sometimes puts you outside of the qualifying point. A lot of times you were all 13th with a 1092. So, my strategy certainly had changed a little bit this year. You kind of had to go for it right from the get-go. My layup this year on the first one might have been 1091 with a 0, and then, hopefully on the second one we could kind of get after it. But definitely extremely tight. The last race of the year, 3 guys were 1090 with a 0, and that was just out of 22 racers, I believe it was. So it's really just quite something.
In terms of the season itself, how challenging is it to win a championship like this? Notwithstanding the changes that you had to make just to keep pace with the competition level at a particular event, you've also got to do that over the sequence of the season. How challenging is the TNT Series to win the championship with?
And I think that's kind of what makes it one of the more difficult series in the Northeast. Is there's a lot of versatility built into the series. So we're traveling to tracks in Canada, tracks in the U.S. Most of them are doubleheader weekends. We're also doing 8th mile, sometimes quarter mile. So you got to really have the car dialed in, on multiple tracks and 2 different distances as well. So
Sure.
It's just a lot of versatility built in to really, I think, win a championship in that. And that's the reason why I think a lot of the previous champions are definitely hitters in this area for sure.
Your season itself, when you put everything together at the end of the year, and you look at the season that you were able to put together with your dad, what stands out to you in terms of the successes it takes a lot of little successes to add up to what you've got at the end of the year, which is that championship. What's some of the stuff that stands out to you?
Yeah, I would say honestly the turning point was really we had the Race of Champions up at Grand Bend Motorplex up in Canada. I won that. That was about the third race of the year. Up until that point, we had gone some rounds, but nothing really stuck out. So winning that race was really special. That's a win I always wanted to get. And I kind of just was able to build on that, qualify well. Got a win at Toronto Motorsports Park, and then just kind of kept pace with the rest of the field.
What was the goal? I mean, when you set out at the start of the year, obviously we can sit back and say all those perfect things about I'm a racer, we go out there to win, that's the whole point, et cetera, et cetera. But in the back of my mind, I got to believe that there was also some degree of expectation. You know, these are the minimum thresholds that we want to come across. Did you set out with the intention of running for the championship from the get-go?
No, to be honest with you, I definitely, I love supporting that series as much as possible, especially with Joe Bonifero, Joe's Transmission, sponsoring the series. But really, my main goal this year was going to be a lot of divisionals and some NHRA national events. And, just over the course of the first few months, didn't have some successes out there. So it kind of, turned into all of a sudden we're kind of chasing the championship here for the TNT Series. My partner, the Bowers, who actually going into the last week, Robert Bauer and myself were number 1 and 2 in the points. So he was obviously doing well, as well as myself. So, we were kind of neck and neck and chasing, decided to kind of run for it at the end there.
Well, last year, I can't remember where they were, but last year's champion went into the last weekend 8th or 9th in points and ended up going on a tear. Right?
Yeah. It was Joe Bonifero's son, one of his sons, Patrick Bonifero.
Right.
I believe the story was he was 10th going into that weekend. I believe he had not won a race in his career up until that weekend. He won Friday night, moved up a little in the points. Won Saturday. They went from Lancaster to Empire, won again. And that put him, I believe, at third. And then ended up making it all the way to the final. Actually, we raced each other in the final the last day. I beat him in the final, but he was able to secure the championship by 1 point.
Right. It was
quite a Cinderella story. Yeah, that was awesome.
and he ended up kind of flirting with that same kind of run, especially with the way that the math was going into that last weekend. There was still several drivers that were mathematically in the chase.
Oh yeah, even going into the last day. I mean, you have Doug Linden, who is probably one of the better bracket racers in the whole Northeast.
Sure.
Always has his program together. He's got a lot of big wins. Robert Bauer, obviously, he's got a ton of potential ahead of him. Up-and-coming driver. He's only 23 years old. Accomplished a lot in a young career. And then Tyler Helene as well. That's a car that always runs a number, and he's a great driver as well. So, yeah, you had 4 guys that really could have won any with one.
Robert Bauer, is he relatively new to the series? I mean, I don't remember coming across that name a whole lot.
Yeah, new to the series. His father, Bob Bauer, has run it a couple of the previous years, but this was his first year running it full-time, and he was able to get Rookie of the Year. He had a couple wins. Definitely had a really good season out there. They got a Chevy 2 Nova. Runs really good.
What's that say to you in terms of looking forward? You alluded to him having a bright future. There's some new blood coming into the sport. There's some new cars that you guys saw, especially over that last weekend. It seems like this tour is heading in an upward trajectory, man. It's got some positive outlooks for 2020.
I think it does for sure. There's a lot of everyone's got their own opinion as to whether chasing the NHRA circuit's the way to go, or there's a lot of these big money races popping up all over the country now for $500,000, $1 million to win now next season. But it seems like the trend might go back to some of this local racing too, just because of the expenses and whatnot. The payout for this TNT series is really just as good as any NHRA divisional event. So I think you're going to see, more of the young blood kind of get in that, and I'm hoping we gain more support for next year for sure.
Is the time that you put in proportionate to the reward? I guess, so to say. At the end of the season, the year-end points championship, the recognition, everything that you get, you made that comparison to the NHRA. You made the comparison to some of these big money races that are cropping up that people are putting so much emphasis on, and suggested maybe that attention is turning back to the local tracks and some of the area stuff. So, when you put all of those pieces together, is the time investment worth the reward in terms of running locally versus someplace where you can get all this national recognition and all these accolades and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think it is. I think some people would say I'm probably crazy for saying that, but because it is a lot of time and money for sure. But you see a lot of these guys that are racing the TNT Series are also at these NHRA events, these big money bracket races. So, I think it's definitely worth it. I definitely have some bigger goals moving forward that I hope to one day acquire, but definitely running this series and winning this series is a huge deal for sure.
What's this compared to, or where does this championship fall on the landscape of your career?
Yeah, this is, as a driver, this is my 11th championship. And I would say this is one of the more special ones for two reasons. One, this really was looking back, I was kind of doing some, just kind of reviewing the season last night, and really a rough season. So still to be able to get a championship out of it is special. I think it showed that we fought hard despite some of the challenges we faced. And also, my fiance was on board this year, so she really got to see the inner workings, what actually went into winning a championship. So that was important, to have her on my side moving forward. But I would say this is definitely one of the more important ones for sure.
What was,
out of all 11 of them?
I knew that it wasn't your first, but at the same time, it's certainly one that's prolific. Is this the first? I'm trying to remember if this was the first year that you had teamed with your dad on the TNT Series.
And that really, I was going to say, that's probably the thing that made it the most special. Yeah, that's the first time we've ever really been partnered up and both, put time into the series. Mm-hmm. The first race of the year, I really kind of screwed us because first race of the year, he won, but I was running for the points that night. Mm-hmm. So we had to take my first round loss over his win, right? Which was kind of, that definitely hurt us.
Sure.
But it was definitely special to be able to team up with a guy who's kind of taught me everything and helped me along the way. He definitely knows what he's doing out there still. He definitely can let the button go and knows what he's doing when it comes to tuning.
How exactly does that work? Do the points go to the car then, and that's how you can have two different drivers? Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's basically when you're teamed up, you have to determine before qualifying who's going to run the number that night.
Okay, I'm with you.
So so basically with the qualifying points being, basically going into that night, you have to determine who is going to be the better of the two of us. So it was kind of tough doing that. His car has always been on this year, and he was driving well, and I was driving pretty good as well. So it was tough to determine that each week.
Right. I think that's kind of cool, the way that it gives you the option, to sort of enjoy a little bit of summer. I like how the schedule was built for the series, and you're running a lot of combined weekends, so you're running 2-day shows, so it might be 12, 14 races, but overall you might only have 8 or 10 trips out,
Right. It's very definitely cost effective for the local racer for sure. As far as just from a travel standpoint, we're definitely getting our money's worth in the series.
Tell me what having your fiance involved changed for you. I mean, obviously, not having to find a way to split time between the race car and the racing series, which takes a lot of attention, even though it's not as intensive and not every single weekend. But at the same time, you're not splitting time between the car and the family because the family's coming with you. How did that play into it? And then also, did that let you focus more on one thing or another because she was able to do something that otherwise you would have had to do?
Yeah, she's probably one of the few people I've met in my life that may be more busy than I am overall. But she's 100% supportive, and it just makes it a lot easier at the end of the day. I know she's behind me 100%. So it really that was a step forward in both the racing career and more importantly between us as a couple as well.
It's what was the handful of things that she was doing in the pits or on race day that helped let you focus more on driving the car?
She actually thinks the whole crew chiefing and checking the tires and all that is boring. She wants to drive, so I'm stuck with the burden of next year probably adding a third car to the operation so she can drive as well.
Right.
But I think that'll be good. She is one of them people that definitely succeeds at most everything she does. So maybe I'll be the one crew chief next year, and hopefully she'll be on the phone with you.
Right. that'd be pretty newsworthy. I think the TNT Super Series would be fine with that, right?
I would think so. Yeah, they have not had a female champion yet, so she could be the first.
That'd be cool. Your fiance and your dad are going to team up, and you're going to be all on your own. 6th, 7th
I'll
place.
I'll just be checking the tires, I guess. Yep.
So it looks like Jason, our resident engineer, has figured out everything working. You back on your feet now?
I think so. I don't know. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yep.
Hey, excellent. Yeah, I don't know what the heck happened there, but
everything quit working.
Everything quit working all at once. Try and do something as simple as put a headset on, and next thing you know, nothing's working, and my monitor wouldn't even connect for some reason. So something wasn't happy, but we're up and running. So sorry about that. I broke the golden rule of you never change anything at the last minute, and for whatever reason, I don't know why, but I thought it was a good idea to get my headset going, and I kind of forgot about that, and it just goes to show what happens. It cost me 15 minutes.
I done told you. You sound fine.
I was saying, I was just thinking that from a sound standpoint that I remember in the past that I always wore the headset, and I guess that it worked a little bit better. But, next time no headset. But, anyways, sorry about the delays. Glad you were able to join us, Pete. I heard that you had mentioned that so your fiance is thinking about potentially competing next year, or is that really early on overall in conversation?
No, she more so just told me she's driving, so I guess she's pretty determined. So yeah, she'll be. I guess that's in the plans in the future for sure.
That's cool.
I mean,
there's dragster though. They won't allow that. They won't allow that to run in the TNT Super Series.
Yeah, I mean, if she's ready, willing, and able, why not? I mean, the nice thing with the throttle stop cars, I mean, I'm sure we've probably mentioned this on the show before. It's very easy to break somebody in, right? Once you get past the noise, if you will, and the other senses that kind of get overloaded being in the car. I mean, the actual speed itself, you can just slowly build up to it, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a lot of tunability. That's what we were actually talking about. Just with a regular, throttle stop, you can kind of set it any way you want. So you can have it just hold it at whatever RPM, and great way to break someone in, a newer driver for sure.
Right. Now, are you down? You sold your dragster, correct?
The dragster that I had this year, we sold that. I got another one coming.
You already have another one coming. Where's that one coming from?
Coming from Ohio.
Oh,
similar
nice.
deal, just a little newer car, a little wider cage, but exact same setup. So looking to kind of do the same thing with that for next year.
Right. And are you still going? So your dad so you were driving the Monza last weekend.
Yep.
So you're gonna have the Monza again next year, right?
I think the plan is, we've still been discussing, but the plan is we're going to set up the Monza really just for TNT and then Super Gas.
Okay.
And then I'm going to have a separate, kind of a separate box, no box car where that's something I'd like to kind of start putting my focus toward is the no box racing. It's always something I've been really good at. I just, for whatever reason, haven't pursued it like I should. So one of the main focuses next year is definitely going to be the bottom bulb racing for sure.
I was saying, now, Chris, I don't know if you got into this at all. Probably not, because Chris probably didn't even know that you raced with us last weekend in Super Gas. And, overall, I guess I'll say the hot streak continued, and you went to the finals last weekend, too. Did you touch on that at all, Chris? Or you probably didn't even know, right?
No, I was kind of hoping that you were going to come back on to talk a little bit about that so we could let you promote your series a little.
Well, I would say don't need to promote it as much as I just wanted to get, Pete, I guess some props basically overall that, yeah, not only was the TNT Super Street champion, but, then came over and raced Super Gas. And I have to say this past weekend in the final of Super Gas, it was two TNT champions. It was Tom Coonley and Pete Maduri in the final of Super Gas. So, well, I guess kind of tells you how good those competitors are.
Yeah, that was I believe his first time actually running Super Gas 640 index, and he certainly got it dialed in pretty quick. Did a great job there for sure.
Yeah, he's. I know that he's talked about coming and racing with us previously. Obviously, he has a back half car.
I think he's a little more inclined now after the win for sure. That's what it sounds like.
Oh yeah, anytime you win, I was just mentioning this to somebody earlier this week that it was Jeff Jackson. Actually, I was talking to Jeff Jackson, who we've had on the show as well, and I said, I always like to have people that come and race with us have some early success, just because of the fact that hopefully it encourages them to come back and race with us more, and maybe we hit on something overall with doing the 5/10 Pro Tree this past weekend rather than the 4/10 that we could potentially get a few more competitors out every weekend.
I would hope so. Yeah, it really seems like it would. A lot more people could. Their cars would fit into that. So, yeah, to me, someone that my car definitely, whether it's the Monza or the truck, would definitely cut a 4.0 light. I have no problem running 5/10 if it brings more competitors out. Yeah.
Now the Monza is a tube chassis car, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, that was a factory built car, Ed Quay car, built. I think it was 2007. And then my dad,
no kidding.
So that was a small block guy that my dad bought it from in Ohio. He bought it brand new from Ed Quay, and it was strictly a small block car. So my dad kind of went through, redid everything this past year, and it's definitely making some pretty big power now.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I didn't realize that. I wasn't sure where the car came from, but funny to hear that a Monza was built in 2007. You said
2000, and the work at Ed Quay, like the chassis and everything, I believe was done in I think it was 04 or 07. Yeah.
Well, regardless, right? It's funny that I guess that a Monza be built in the 2000s. Most of the Monzas in Vegas out there.
I think the car was probably run as just a back half car, I would think, before that. And then whoever had it, took it to him, and then that was complete rebuild at that point.
Yeah. Now, your dad sold his car, right?
It's hard to keep track. Which car would that be? Yeah. He sells them so fast and buys them so fast. I go, and he lives 2 miles from here, and anytime I go over there, I'm not really sure what I'm going to see.
I will say in the time that I've known your dad, which is a long time, but I would say that he probably owns the record for the most number of cars owned of everybody that I know of in Western New York, as far as race cars go.
Yeah, when I really started to get into racing, the junior dragster days, I kind of went back and went through photo albums and was just kind of compiling all of the cars. And there's been a lot of cars that people never saw that he would buy, completely redo, flip them. I mean, there has been a lot of cars over the years. Yeah. I couldn't even put a number on it, I don't think.
Now, is he? Do you think going to get buy another car and get back in the driver's seat as well for next year?
Yeah, of course. I talked with him last night. I had him, my parents over for dinner, and I believe he just bought the 99 Monte Carlo that he's going to redo for next year. I don't know if that's going to be a race or a flip or what, but I believe that's coming home next week. Okay.
Now, was he running? I know you guys were partners in the points, or a team, I guess, if you want to call it that. Team drivers in the TNT points. Was he actually running every single race just like you were as well?
He ran, I want to say, the first about 6 races. So he was driving the Monza, I was driving the truck.
Okay.
We ended up making some changes on the truck, and then those last 4 races, I drove the Monza. I actually hopped in it for the first time. It wasn't until, I believe it was the first week of August, and I went right to the final the first time I drove it. So he decided to let me drive it at the last 4 TNT races.
Okay, all right. Did you end up racing your dad at all this year?
We had to race each other once at Empire.
I would say it sounds like I would say from where you were going, it sounded like at least once.
Yeah, I think that was the only time. Was just it was the second race of the year at Empire. He run lit and I was late, so I got lucky.
I was just going to ask. So how did that race go down? Did you guys basically have team rules that okay, you claim points, so I'm going to lay down, or did you actually race for it?
No, we did race for it, but I think he was set up a little too aggressive, and I might have been a little too conservative. So it worked out. But I think that was second round we raced of. I think it was the second race of the year.
Now, at this point, was this your first TNT championship? I mean, you've been running, I guess I'll say the TNT pretty regularly, but at the same point in time, you've done a whole bunch of racing. I mean, like I said, you talked about racing bottom bulb racing, and I mean, I will say that your dad obviously has been racing super gas for quite some time, and you really came up, like you mentioned. I mean, you ran junior dragsters, you kind of came up through the ranks, if you will, and you've raced a lot of stuff. You've traveled, won an NHRA national event at Epping, right? So I mean, you've done a lot of racing, but I don't know that you actually ever concentrated or did enough TNT races to win a championship. Or is this your first, or have I missed one?
It's the second championship we won, actually with another Monza I won in 2010.
Okay.
And then, aside from that, we chased it pretty competitively in 2011.
Yeah.
And then basically I moved, that was about the time I moved to Texas in 2012. So my dad started running the series, but I really haven't chased it until this last year. We finished third, and then obviously this year.
Yeah, it's funny because
I always try to support it as much as I can, obviously, but
right.
As far as actually running it for the championship, probably done it about, I would say, the fourth year.
Well, I would say even when you lived in Texas, I mean, you were supporting a lot of local series. I mean, you were basically flying back home to race a lot.
Yeah, I was driving my dad had a Corvette Roadster at the time, so we had some success with that. I would fly back and drive that here and there. And then I was also teamed up with Scott Jern, was driving his dragster. So
right.
I think the one summer I counted, I think I made a total of 9 trips back to Buffalo from San Antonio.
Yeah, I wasn't even sure that you had officially moved to Texas, quite honestly. I kind of felt like you were just a commuter, I guess, to Texas, if you will.
Yeah, no, I had a residence in San Antonio for 3 full years, yeah.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that long that you were out there. So now, yeah. I mean, you're back in Western New York now, I mean, full-time. I mean, working for Dynabrade, obviously. Dynabrade sponsors. I mean, do they sponsor all the cars? I mean, I think they do, right?
They do, yeah. Basically, it's under my father and myself, so it's all the cars that I own or he owns. So basically, anything we take out to the track definitely has the Dynabrade logo on it.
Yeah, and I will say they've been a long time supporter of local drag racers, going way back. I mean, at one point in time, I actually had the Dynabrade logo on the side of the Corvette as well.
I remember you telling me that.
Yeah. I mean, they've been really a great company from that standpoint. Kind of supporting everybody, and I mean, at this point, I mean, they've been sponsoring you guys full time, and for good reason. They have no reason to stop doing that, but it's been quite a while. I mean, I would guess 10 years, maybe.
No, this will be this past year was the third year. We did a brief sponsorship back in, I think it was 2008, just kind of from a local standpoint, and then we stopped for a while, and then I basically got hired there in 2012 when I moved when I was moving back to Buffalo from Indianapolis. I actually was in Texas for 3 years, and then Indianapolis for 1 year. So when I was in the process of moving back to Buffalo, that's when we ended up working this deal out. And now it's a full-time sponsorship. So this was the third year, 2019.
Oh, okay, that's good. Now, I guess what are your other than I guess at this point, are you planning on defending in 2019, or do you have bigger plans? Other than the foot brake racing that you've already talked about. I mean, obviously you're going to do the foot brake racing, but do you think you're going to do more traveling again in 2020?
I think we'll definitely do some traveling. I'm going to try to make it a little more, I guess, cost effective. The events I do go to, I kind of need to sit down and decide exactly, aside from the local stuff, if I want to chase an NHRA division title, if I want to do these, the bigger buck money racing. I think it probably will be the NHRA route, but I would think it would probably be, like I had said, the Monza strictly would be set up for super gas when we go to an NHRA event, and then I'm going to have another car, probably the truck, set up for super street at those events. So 1090 and 990, and then the truck would be the bottom bulb deal as well.
I would say, do you feel like you have unfinished business with the potentially chasing the division championship? I mean, it seems like everybody, for the most part, what everyone really is chasing is that ever elusive big Wally, right? But you already have one of those.
That was huge. Kind of getting that monkey off my back. Something that was always a dream of mine. So to be able to get a true NHRA Wally is definitely a big deal. I would love to win a divisional championship. It's just a matter of getting off to a good start. It's obviously tough in this area. This year was a perfect example. I mean, with the weather being the way it was, we could not get out and test. The first divisional that we went to was in Columbus. First week of May, we tried getting out basically all throughout April. Had 2 brand new cars, 2 brand new motors, and we just couldn't get out. So all of a sudden, it's the first of May, and the first passes on the cars are at a divisional and racing against guys who probably have 30, 40, 50 passes under their belts for the year.
Right. Yeah, and like I said, it's always
a tough thing in this area.
Yeah, I would say, it's always tough up here. Not that everyone that lives up here isn't necessarily in the same situation, but you start traveling like that and going away, and let's say your first race was Virginia, for instance. It's like you're going to pick guys from that come from down south that have been probably racing for 2 months already. At this point in time, we wouldn't even have basically been out at all. So you're loading your stuff up, driving down to Virginia, and especially with a new combination. I mean, that's going to be really, really hard for sure.
It definitely was this year. Yeah, and then really after Columbus, I was going to say Norwalk Divisional was the next weekend, and so all of a sudden and then it was an off week, and then you're in Maple Grove. So all of a sudden you were not even in June, and basically almost half the season's out of the way.
Yeah, it's funny. We were talking. I was talking with John Pelicane, and I talked to somebody else this week too on Saturday at Empire. And, we were talking about, some of the performances that we were seeing from Maple Grove, the national event that was just a few weeks ago. And it really just drives home the fact again that, man, if you can win in these local series out here, you can go on the road and win anywhere, right? There's no doubt that guys around here could be competitive if they had the resources to be able to travel. I think it's just it. I mean, a lot of guys just can't do it financially. So, but if you can win up here, you can win anywhere.
I would, I know that's kind of been the quote that's been said around this area for many, many years, and I personally agree with it 100%. You see a lot of the hitters from this area. You see them in the NHRA. You see them going to late rounds in the money races. So I would agree with that 100%. Just winning, going to Empire or going to Lancaster on a normal Friday or Saturday is, to win that, whether, it doesn't matter what it pays, definitely takes a lot of skill. There's no question.
I know Billy Lieber was a little, it's standard 8th mile racing, I guess, to a certain extent, against Coonley, second round. I think Billy was 10 on the tree, left second, because I think Coonley was 9. And I think Billy was like 10 on the tree, taking, I'm going to say, 8,000 stripe, no good, get out. And, it really is just crazy, especially when you start talking about 8th mile racing, how tight it is. I mean, yeah, granted, I realize that, you go to, the fall fling or something like that. It's absolutely ridiculous. But, there's a perfect example in our little Super Gas series where we had, basically 8 cars. Yeah, 10 light, taking 8, no good.
Yeah, and then in the final, I was going to say he was 007 and 640 with a 6, so 13,000 total, and I was 12, so I had 1,000 to work with down there, and wasn't able to execute. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say he left you all that room. Come on.
Yeah, all that 1,000, right? yeah. But I agree with the point you made. I've always said this. Some people disagree, but there's a huge difference, in my opinion, eighth mile versus quarter mile. And I definitely like the eighth mile racing. There's no question. But it seems like it sometimes gets almost comical just how tight it gets, especially when you're going to some of these races that pay 10, 20, 50, 100,000 to win. And it is just truly unbelievable how tight it actually can get. The quarter mile seems to spread it out a little bit. I think it makes it more of a driver's race. I think there's no question it's still tight, but I feel like it's a little bit more of a driver's race where you can actually apply a little more skill down there, and holding numbers makes a little more sense, and different strategies. Whereas a lot of the eighth mile stuff now is just hold it to the floorboard, and everybody's 005 and dead on 5 at worst, and if you're not getting inside of 100th, you're on the trailer.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's no doubt. And I completely agree. I will say the one thing that I did like, and I don't know if the fall fling has been doing this for a while, or I should say the fling races in general, if they've been doing it for a while, or they just did it this last race. But I did like the fact that this last race was single car, single entry. So there's no double entries. There was buybacks, obviously, but no double entries. But that said, yeah, it definitely makes that kind of race really just like going to the casino, right? You could pretty much put the ball on the roulette wheel and spin it, and whatever number it is, it's not going to necessarily come up twice. I mean, it's just so close and so random. I don't know if they had any repeat winners. I don't think that they did at this last event. I think maybe the best case scenario they had was maybe somebody that won one race, maybe went deep into the rounds in another race, but yeah, if you're more than 10 at a race like that, generally you're not going to. I mean, you really reduce your chances of winning to less than 50%. But even up around here, I mean, man, if you're 20, again, Super Gas is a perfect example from this past weekend. After first time run, all 8 of us were within plus or minus 200ths of that magic 640 number, even though you had at least 4 guys that were racing Super Gas for their very first time this year. That's just craziness.
It's impressive. I agree. Yeah, there's no question about that. Yeah. And you see the same thing with the TNT. I think we had talked about it. Like that last race of the TNT series, the Saturday, really sticks out because we had 22 cars, and the second one I went 1090 with a 0, and the next number was a 3. Like, to me, that's almost. I mean, there's definitely some luck there. I'm obviously not aiming to be dead on with a 0, and I go over to the qualifying sheet, and I am number 1, but the guy behind me is 1090 with a 0 and then a 3 following it, and the guy behind him is on with a 0 and 5 following it. So, you couldn't. I don't think you could handpick the best 22 Super Street racers in the country and guarantee they could duplicate that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I know that I remember Doug Linden posting from that weekend that he went 1090 with something. I don't remember what it was, but I remember he said, that was good for number 6. And
I was gonna say, I think it was 1090 with a 6. I remember Tyler Helene, who ended up finishing second. That day he was 1091 with an 8, so obviously very respectable. And that was like number 12, I want to say. So barely even got any qualifying points for being 18,000 from perfect in only 2 sessions, and that was the only quarter mile race of the year. So
that's right. I forgot.
Did not even reach quarter mile.
Yeah, that's right. I totally forgot about that too. I mean, did that? I mean, it doesn't sound like. Well, did you test on Friday night, the Friday before?
No, I don't think so. No.
I'm trying to remember because you guys. Saturday was the race, but you guys actually didn't race on Friday, right? It was just us and Tune on that Friday night before, right?
Oh, yeah, correct. It was just test and tune. So we went up there because really we hadn't run the Monza. We had some settings, some numbers, but we'd never ran a 1090 run with it. With it being as quick as it is, we have to go about 7:55 in the eighth to go 1090. So we just wanted to get that kind of straightened out.
So you made a couple passes Friday night to kind of get things ironed out, but at that point in time, you were obviously ready to go. You went into the weekend being number one in points. Was Tyler Helene, was he number two? Was he right behind you? Is that how it kind of finished? It started and finished?
No, I was number one by 1 point, and it was over Robert Bauer just by 1 point. Yeah.
And when did you...
Doug Linden was only, I think, 11 points back from that, so that's only a round behind that. And then Tyler was real tight as well.
Yeah. I mean, I know going in, I forget how many people there were, but Ted told me that there was some, well, maybe it was Joe Boniferro when we had him on the show a couple of weeks ago, that he had mentioned that there was a whole bunch of people that, still had a shot at winning the championship going into that last race. I guess when did you know?
I want to say that this is probably seven people that had a chance going into that weekend. At least 6 or 7 people, and then even into the last day, there was still 4 people for sure.
Yeah. When did you know that you won? That you were the champ?
When the rain started falling. That was because at that point, after it was tight after qualifying. Basically, I believe Robert went down first for first round. And he had lost, so that negated his chances. And then Tyler went down behind that, and he lost. So it was really between Doug Linden and myself, and Doug was behind me. I was the second to last pair to go. So I turned the wind light on, and then he turned it on behind me. So I believe the way it would have worked if we would have finished, if he would have won that entire race and I lost that next round, I think he would have won by 1 point.
Okay.
So, and I would definitely not put that past someone like him. So, in reality, if it doesn't rain, we don't know what happens.
2 seasons in a row where it was settled by 1 point, potentially, that'd have been something.
And that tells you that obviously the point system, Ted Barnes, and he's developed his point system, and I think I don't think he gets too many complaints, but I think some people don't like how heavily the qualifying points are weighted, but I think if you look back in the series, how tight these races are, all these points chases, it definitely speaks for itself.
Yeah, that many cars late in the going having the opportunity to go for the championship, that certainly shows you a lot. It tells you a lot about where the points are, how things are working, how tight it is. You're going into the last race, the last 2 years with, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys still mathematically in the hunt. It's what you want. You want it to be exciting down to the end.
And especially from just from a support standpoint, if a guy's got it locked up going into the last weekend, you might not get the guy who's 4th, 5th, 6th coming out to support the series. So sure. I think it's important to come up with, a point structure that is beneficial and makes it come down to the last race, and he definitely has done that, I think.
It seemed like there was more drivers with double-digit attendance this year than last year, too.
I would, he does the 40 points bonus if you attend all the races. I think that's a great idea. I think that's definitely a nice incentive to try to get the support for all the races.
Sure.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like for the Western Super Out Association, it's like I don't really know what to do with that. Quite frankly, it's like we always had guys that could only make 1 or 2 races, so I always hated to make guys join the points. But at the same point in time, like I said, without a points program, you don't necessarily really, get the hook in to get somebody to commit to racing your races. And, I don't know what to do with that, quite honestly. You want to be flexible, but at the same point in time, you want people to support the series too. And
yeah, I would. I mean, in my personal opinion, obviously I was only able to get to that last race this year. But I think, I think it was amazing, what actually happened. There was, I think you got to step back and look at what actually happened this past Saturday, and there was only 7 cars that entered. And you might have a person complain, it was a $200 entry fee. But
right.
At the end of the day, there was a full $1,400 paid out.
Right.
you're not going to race for $1,400 locally. And then, I heard I asked a person who was just running Super Pro that day why they didn't get in, because their car could run 640 and definitely a guy that could hit the tree. And he said, I'd rather race for, pay $50 or whatever Super Pro is and race for 800. So I said to him, what happens when you win third round? And in Super Pro, if you win third round, you're getting nothing. And in your series, if you win third round, that's the final, with the lower car count. So there's $1,400. There's a lot of good racers this season that have not won $1,400 at a race. That's a pretty good payday, especially to run the car down the track, for 2 qualifiers and 3 rounds, 5 passes for the day. You're not spending much in fuel. And in my personal opinion, if I was you, I would continue running it exactly the way you had it, because I think the people are going to start seeing that and start coming, especially if I know you were talking about maybe expanding it a little next year. I would think the support should definitely be there.
Yeah, we definitely want to.
I know my support will be there.
Well, we had, Gary Jason from Lancaster on a few weeks ago, and I know Mike Swinarski has expressed interest in having us coming to race Lancaster, and definitely would like to explore that. And I think that if we, raced 8 Mile like that, we could potentially, and kept it at the 5/10 Pro Tree, that we could get some people to support the series. So I think that's a real potential. The entry fee versus payout thing, I mean, from my perspective, I look at it and say, geez, I mean, when you look at your total cost to bring a car out to the track, whether you really spend $100 or $200 for entry is pretty minuscule overall in the grand scheme of things. But, overall, when then you look at the amount of money that gets paid out, I mean, obviously that doubles your overall purse. I mean, since we pay out everything that we take in. You had mentioned this weekend that you kind of liked it because it was kind of like a little mini, a gambler, a high roller gamblers race. And, if you only do 4 or 5 races a year like that, sure, why not? And, again, when we first did a race like this, we ended up having, I think we had 9 or 10 cars. Actually, it was a little bit more than that. We maybe had 12 cars because we paid $1,800 to the winner. It was a 4-round race, but we paid $1,800 to the winner. Guys really like that idea that, a 4-round race, you're running for $1,800 to win. Why not? And I would personally myself much rather do that than spend $100 and now run a 4-round race and run for half that money. Not that $900 is terrible, but like I said, when you look at your total cost for competing kind of at this level, that extra $100 in my mind is just in the noise.
Especially like you said, if it's not a weekly thing. If you're talking about having people do it on a weekly basis, that's one thing. But to have 5-6 races a year, especially if it complemented something like the TNT Super Series, that's just about a full season for a racer, and they never have to travel probably more than a couple hours from their house to run for good money and great competition.
Well, we'll have to see what the future brings for us. I know that I had exclaimed in our little Facebook messaging chat system that I had pulled the plug and chopped it up into a million pieces and thrown it in the fire. But having this race this past weekend and seeing some people excited about potentially being able to come race with us in the 5/10 Pro Tree, and quite frankly, you and Tom, I mean, the two of you haven't really raced. I think both of you may have raced with us once before over the 5 or 6 years that I've had the series, but seeing the two of you come out and do well, it kind of has reinvigorated me a little bit to think, all right, maybe we'll give this another shot and try and open it up and try and get some more of the guys that typically compete in the TNT Super Series that have a car that's fast enough to run 640 in the 8th mile to come and try giving Super Gas a go. All I know is I want to race a Pro Tree. I don't want to see that go away. And obviously the TNT series is a great series. You get the opportunity to race a Pro Tree with that. But I don't know what Ted Series runs. I guess 10 races maybe. Mostly.
Really, I think it's really only usually about 6 trips because most of them are double headers. But I think, I don't know what he's doing for next year, but I would think it would probably follow a similar format, so 10 races total.
Yeah, and like I said, he typically does doubles, and Yeah, I mean, we've talked about, somebody mentioned this weekend, hey, would it be possible potentially to do a double with us and, Friday night at Lancaster and Saturday at Empire? And yeah, the answer is absolutely. I mean, if we could find the weekend that's free and people are willing to do that, then yeah, we could obviously do something like that too. And obviously, doubles make sense when you can cut down on your travel costs and stuff like that too, right? But you just have to have a venue to race at. Empire, when we first started doing doubles, Empire was racing on Saturdays and Sundays, but then Jerry cut the Sundays out of his normal schedule, so we were kind of back to just running one day. But we'll have to see. But yeah, definitely, I'm more interested to hear your feedback. And if you talk to anybody, I'd love to hear what their feedback would be too, because if we get enough people that are interested in it, we'll do it again.
Yeah, I think it's also great that, the two local tracks, as far as Empire and Lancaster, we definitely got solid owners. They're all drag racers. They all know each other. They all, I think, are working together pretty nicely. So I don't think a lot of people in Western New York realize just how fortunate we are at this point, just from a local racing standpoint. And then you got people like John Cera, Vince Mussolino, they're running these big $7,500, $10,000 races to win. It's really in my personal opinion, the local racing here is definitely coming back. You got a lot of hitters kind of that are wanting to stay local now, and I guess we'll see how it goes. But I see a lot of good things happening in the near future here.
It is amazing when you look at the state of drag racing, let's call it, in this area. Obviously the track owners are a big part of it, and just how that's changed how that landscape has really changed drastically over the last 10 years. And, 10, 15 years ago, you could argue that this wasn't a really great area to be a drag racer in. And, I'm not going to say that we're in the mecca of drag racing, right here in Western New York, but we're pretty lucky at this point to have the owners that we do willing to put some money into the tracks and give us the opportunity to go out and really race what we want and, do events. I mean, that's the thing. Again, I haven't really worked with Lancaster. I know Mike will be great. Mike and Vito will be great at Lancaster. I really haven't done much with them. But, Jerry, for instance, I mean, pretty much anything I've wanted to do and asked Jerry about, the answer was pretty much, yeah, sure, no problem. And that's pretty nice. Yeah. A lot of tracks, most tracks wouldn't be like that. So we're pretty fortunate. And, now going into, 2020 will be Lancaster's really first, I'll call it, full season. I'm hopeful we'll have some really nice events and some big things coming out of that track in 2020.
I really think, especially, I know this whole deal was worked out late for this coming year. So they did a phenomenal job. They listened to the racers. And, no huge changes were made. But if you go in that facility now, you notice a lot of just little things. They're definitely putting a lot of time into the facility. So I think now that they have a full off season to kind of regroup and see how things worked, and see now that they do have some nice support, I'm hoping next year is going to be huge. And moving forward, I think it's really going to be pretty big.
Yeah, now we just need to hope for a little bit better weather early in the season than we had this year.
Yeah, it definitely turned around. I mean, I guess middle of June and through the rest of the season was, I guess, pretty good. But it was definitely, quite a rough start. I don't think I got to the back part of my lawn until about middle of July. It was definitely a rough season.
Well, I know I'm one of the
better next year.
Yeah, I would say I'm not hardcore, so I'm not generally coming out the first time the track is open. I don't even think we got out really until the first week of June because, by the time the weather had warmed up and you said, all right, I'm going to start working on the car, and then the weather cooperated, it was pretty darn late. It was crazy.
I guess
Chris,
it's all a matter of what you want to do in this area. So it's if you want to chase the point series that travel all the way to throughout the whole Northeast, you definitely have to find a way to get things started early. And knowing that weather might be a factor, you really have to take that into account.
Yeah, and I will say that my traveling days, I think, are over unless I hit the lottery or Chris and the Final Round podcast decides to sponsor me, maybe.
It's not happening.
Well, I'm going to go and every night before I go to bed, I say my prayers that the Final Round podcast will sponsor me. So I'm not going to change that. So one of these days, I'm sure my prayers will be answered.
There you go. Keep praying. You'll get there.
Right. I guess I'm looking here at the clock because I joined late. We're running up close to 8 o'clock. Was there anything, Chris, that I guess you wanted to cover before we kind of turn it over to Pete and let him, I guess, get his last say in?
No, I mean, obviously, Pete, we appreciate you coming on the show. Is there anybody that you wanted to make mention of? I know we talked a little bit about Dynabraid and your dad and getting the chance to run with everybody and hit on Joe's transmissions from the TNT Super Series. Was there anybody else that you wanted to make mention of?
Yeah, there's probably a list that I could take a week compiling. Like I said, we've been very fortunate over the years, really with my dad's support. Any championship we've chased or anything we've put our mind to, we've been pretty successful. But there's definitely a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that go into it. Mm-hmm. But definitely a lot of help from the outside. And to lift everybody would be probably an hour show in itself. But just real quick, I did want to thank the Bauer family. They've gone. We've traveled this whole year together. They really went above and beyond for me. Joel Lilienthal, JSL Automotive. He's been a supporter of mine from the beginning. Mike Swinarski, given me a lot of opportunities over the year. Mark Caruso, Billy Lieber, Jason Vitez, Mike Janis, and especially Joe Bonifero, too. Just always been behind me. And, without all those guys, laying the foundation, I certainly wouldn't be anywhere near where I am today. So definitely want to thank all those guys. And there's probably 20 people I forgot. But aside from my family, my mom, my dad, my sister, and my fiance, Jen, just really appreciate all those people being there.
Well, man, we know it's a family program. We look forward to seeing Jen get in the car next year. Hopefully you like turning wrenches because it sounds like that's what you're going to be doing next year as well.
Yeah, I don't think my wallet's looking forward to it, but,
But,
hey, I would say one important topic. I don't know if you touched on it, Chris. I know I didn't hear it, but do we have a date that's set?
We are looking into end of next summer, not just because the racing season's over, but we got some ideas about doing a fall destination wedding. So we'll probably do that and then kind of have a larger informal reception after the actual wedding. That's the plans right now.
I would say full destination wedding at a drag strip.
Nah, I tried to talk her into that, but she wasn't having it. So it will not. I guess it will not be at a racetrack.
Let her drive all summer. Maybe she'll change her mind. We'll see. Well, Pete, man, again, congratulations on the TNT Super Series Championship here in 2019. We look forward to catching up with you soon. Have a great winter. Hopefully all the wedding planning goes well, and we look forward to catching up with you here before too long.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate you guys having me.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Hey,
we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, talk to you later. Thank you.
Now. A couple thoughts from Pete Maduri. We promised him 30 minutes, and we ended up going for 60. After all, despite all of Jason's protesting and early on not even wanting to come on the air.
I had a feeling. I mean, I know that, talking to Pete beforehand, that we were going to try and keep it short, but not that Pete is the big talker. I'm a bigger talker, I'm sure, than Pete is, but he's easy to have a conversation with. And I'm like, man, we have a lot longer conversations than 30 minutes with people that aren't big talkers. And yeah, so I knew we were going to go long unless he specifically told us that, hey, you know what? Sorry, guys, I got to go.
Right.
And I'm glad he didn't. I'm glad he was able to spend.
Covered a lot of ground tonight, but I think that is going to do it for this edition of the Final Round Drag Racing Podcast. Number 70 in the books. Jason, hopefully you get feeling better and get your car back on the road and everything is straightened out and settled. I'm going to miss you at the production meeting later on, but I think we're going to be watching football nonetheless. We'll catch up with everybody again in a couple weeks. Next week, Final Round won't be on the air, not scheduled to be 31st lap. We'll be working with Dirt Track Digest, bringing you some circle track action from Super Dirt Week up at Oswego. We'll be live all weekend long, so we're looking forward to that. And we'll be looking forward in a couple weeks when we get Jason back in here. We'll dive into a little bit of the RC world as Motorama has inked a couple of upcoming deals. The annual February Spectacular for February 14th, 15th, and 16th of 2020 in Harrisburg at the Farm Show Complex. We'll be getting into some of that stuff as well. Jason, man, have a good rest of the week. We'll catch up with you soon. That's going to do it for this one here at the North Park building at Academy Square. We'll see everybody next time. This has been the Final Round Drag Racing Podcast, coming to you live from the FingerLakes1.com studios in downtown Seneca Falls, New York. We'll see you right back here again in 2 weeks. Thanks for watching.